I have two Cellys I'll never forget. One of them was batshit crazy. The other one wanted me to call him by his nickname. I refused to do it. I think I did a video on this before, but I'm going to do it again. So I knew this guy. This is the first one I'm going to talk about, the one with the nickname. I knew this guy, and he hustled, man. He worked in the kitchen a lot. Would bring onions and other tomatoes and other things back and sell them. Different types of food. Well, one day, I guess he got caught and he went to the hole. When he got out, they put him in my cell. Now, his nickname was Donkey. I kept calling him Celly. I'd say Celly this, Celly that, you know, whenever I wanted to talk to him or say something to him. He tells me one day, he goes, "Hey, Harvey," he called me by name, "why don't you call me Donkey? You know, I go by Donkey." I said, I'm not calling you Donkey. And he said, "Why not?" I said, "It's just weird. I'll call you Celly." He goes, "Well, didn't you call me Donkey when you wasn't my Celly?" And I said, "No, I'd say, hey, you. Hey. I said, I ain't calling you Donkey. That's out." And so he goes out and he tells some other people about it. And they're kind of laughing. They come up to me and they said, "You ain't going to call your Celly Donkey?" And I said, "No, I ain't going to call him Donkey." They said, "Well, everybody calls him Donkey." I said, "I'm not calling him Donkey. It's just not, it's just not happening." So he finally gets over it, you know, and he lets me call him Celly. Or hey, you. But he goes, "Man, I don't know what my Celly's do." Think about it. Would you call your Celly Donkey? He said, "I wouldn't have a problem with it if that was his name. But I had it first." I said, "I'm not calling you that." Anyway, the second one I had, he had been at the Missouri State Penitentiary. I heard he got his butt beat there for something he did. But anyway, in Potosi, I ended up being his Celly. I think it was Potosi. Well, let's just going to say Potosi. I can't remember exactly. But I ended up being his Celly. I get out of the hole. It was a step-up program you had to go through. I ended up being his Celly. And the first thing I noticed is he'd take a sheet and put over his TV and then cover his head with it and watch his TV like that. And so I just looked at him, you know, I said, "Man, that's kind of strange." And finally, when it was count time, I said, "Hey, Celly, I got my own TV. You don't have to worry about me watching your TV." He goes, "I'm not doing that to keep you from watching. You can watch my TV if you want." He goes, "But you got to stick your head under the sheet like I do." "No, I'm good, man. I'm going to watch my own TV." I said, "Why do you do that?" He said, "There's a couple reasons. One is there's dust and stuff in the cell, you know, and it kind of keeps my TV from getting dusty." Okay, I said, "What's the second reason?" He goes, "I'll show you later this evening." So that evening rolled around, and he goes, "Hey, come to the window. I want to show you something." I go to the window, and I said, "What are we looking at?" He said, "You see those dragonflies out there?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "They come up to the window and look at us." They come up to the window and look at us. He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "They got little cameras on them. They spy on us." I said, "Well, if we're not doing anything wrong, what's the problem?" I'm just going along with this, but I'm thinking, this guy is out there. He goes, "We don't want them spying on us." I said, "We don't?" I said, "You doing something I should know about? Something illegal?" He goes, "No." I said, "Because if you are, I kind of want to know. I want to have a heads up. Not that I'm going to say anything or anything. I just want a heads up." He says, "No, it's not like that." He goes, "I just don't want them spying on us." The funny thing is, I get out of prison, and there's a guy that is saying the same thing. He goes, dragonflies have cameras on them. First thing I thought about was that guy. I said, man, why does everybody think that? And so he gets talking to me and another guy about this. He goes, yeah, they got birds and they got dragonflies and they got bugs and stuff. They got cameras on them. They spy on the American people. We, the American people, they spy on us. And this time I'm not laughing so much. I'm just like, wow, man, there's people that really think that. And he looks at me and he says, I can tell you don't believe me. I said, I'm having a very hard time believing this. He goes, go look it up. I went and looked it up. Sure enough, they do have like dragonflies with cameras on them. But I do not think that this guy that I was in prison with, I do not think that those dragonflies that were coming up to the window were spying on us. And it didn't make sense anyway. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just put a camera? And I told him that too. Why don't they just put a camera in each cell? They'd see us better that way. He goes, no, they want to be sneaky about it. I said, they can put a camera in these cells and we would not even know about it. In fact, they may have. We don't know. And he goes, yeah, but this way it's cheaper. I said, I'm thinking a bunch of dragonflies out there with cameras on them is pretty expensive. And how do they know? How come they're only going up to certain windows? But that's not the only thing. The guy did other things that was just crazy too. And I think I had another Celly that was kind of crazy, but he wasn't crazy. It's just an OCD thing. He moved in with me, and after he got everything set up, I picked up my cup, took a drink, set it back down, and he moved it. I thought, well, that's kind of strange. And I knew this guy. I got along with him on the yard. Everything had to be in its exact spot. And so I lit a cigarette, sat down, and he moved it a little bit. And I asked him, I said, man, why do you keep moving my stuff? He goes, I'm just putting it back where you had it. The exact spot you had it in. He said, you see the little... Because we had a tile on the desk, and anytime you set something on it, it left a little impression. He said, I'm putting it back where the impression's at. Finally, after a few days, I told him, I said, dude, I moved in here. I said, I'll move out. I said, you're a good dude, but I cannot deal with this. And he goes, man, everybody tells me that. I said, if it makes you feel any better, you're not like the one Celly I had. And he goes, what Celly is that? And I told him about the guy with the sheet over his head and the dragonflies and stuff. He goes, well, that's just plain crazy. I got OCD. I said, but you got it in such a bad way that it's almost crazy. I said, I'm not calling you crazy. It's just crazy things you do. So anyway, those are two, I guess three. I only was going to talk about two, but I ended up talking about three of the people that I had. And like I said, when I got out, that one guy reminded me of one because he was talking about cameras on dragonflies too. If you guys had any Cellys that was crazy or did something crazy, let me know in the comments. If you know anybody just on the streets that's like that. And if you've heard about cameras on dragonflies, I'd really like to know more about that because apparently it's a thing. But I don't think it's as common as people think it is. Anyway, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.